How's everybody doing? Good?
Morning.
Good. So we'll get started. We'll start a couple minutes early. Welcome to the wonderful world of Agile planning with VSTS. My name's Dan, this is Charles. We're both program managers on the VSTS team in the Agile space. I guess you mind doing it?
Yeah, I can do it.
Does everybody know what VSTS is and TFS is? Actually, who here does not know what it is? Good. Okay, so we're going to skip this slide. We know the difference between VSTS and TFS. We like to confuse everybody. We've got one product, two different names. Okay. TFS is our on-prem version. VSTS is up in the cloud. So we'll go ahead and skip that. And so when we kind of set up this demo, what we'd like to kind of do is walk through how we actually use VSTS for planning-wise. I thought that resonated a little bit better than just kind of going through a hollow demo. So I'll set it up with a couple slides, and then we'll actually walk through the demo itself. So within VSTS, we use VSTS to build VSTS. We're a group of about 600, and we're spread across about 40 different feature teams. And one of the things that we like to do, go ahead and switch, is inside our culture and inside the tool set that we like to kind of portray is this notion that we call aligned autonomy. And so it's really the balance between alignment and autonomy. And so when we talk about alignment, we talk about, hey, these are the things that we need to do inside of an organization together, especially as we scale up. Otherwise, we kind of create too much chaos. And then the autonomy level is like, these are the things that we would need to get out of the way and let the teams do what they do best. And so a couple examples for alignment would be like, you can imagine that we're in an organization, we have a bunch of business goals, we have value we need to provide to our users, and if we're not all on the same page of what that means, we're probably not going to be successful, right? Another good example is just how we do day-to-day work as we scale across more than one team. A good example for that is like sprint length. If you can imagine, if we have 40 different teams and we're all on different sprint lengths and we're trying to deliver something in the service, it becomes very hard to coordinate and collaborate on and plan for. So there's certain things that we want to do inside the org to kind of balance that out. Go ahead and switch to the next one. So how this practically lays out inside of VSTS is we'll align on scenarios and features. So our leadership will come to us and say, hey, these are the big rocks that we want to move. These are the problems we need you guys to solve. Those become charters for our teams to go ahead and work on. And then the teams will go ahead and say, all right, let's go ahead and investigate that. Let's figure that out. Let's kind of spec that stuff out. These are the features that we want to build. And we kind of do some back and forth with our leadership team, and we kind of agree, say, yep, this is the set of features, right? So that's the alignment piece. And then when we go ahead and execute, we really don't care, right? The organization doesn't care. We'll let the teams do what they need to do to execute. So we have the taxonomy of stories and tasks, which is fine. But if a team wants to run Scrum, they run Scrum. If they want to run Kanban, they can run Kanban. If they want to do a bunch of sticky notes up on the wall, they can do that too. It really doesn't matter, right? And so that's finding that balance. And then, one thing to note is we find the balance between alignment and autonomy. If we have too much alignment, obviously the issue there is we're going to be pushing down too much process on teams, and they're not going to want to work there anymore. And then if we have too much of autonomy in the team, it becomes too chaotic trying to coordinate and plan things together, right? So it's finding that balance. Next slide. So one more thing we like to note is how we align on planning. Most of us who are in the Agile space, it's kind of like we don't plan until the very last moment. But when you're working on a service that has millions of users and they keep asking when's the next thing's going to come out, it's not necessarily most practical. So what we do is we have this rolling planning thing that we do. We'll go ahead and we'll put a roadmap together for an 18-month roadmap. Say these are the big problems we're going to solve, and then we'll bite off 6 months worth of work, right? And these are the features that we're going to do to kind of fulfill those scenarios. And then we'll go ahead and break those down into 3 sprints, and then we'll actually execute at the sprint level. So the team is responsible for, obviously, the execution at the sprint level. The teams are responsible for putting those 3 sprint plans together. The team is responsible for basically taking care of the details of the features. And then our organization leadership level is responsible for saying, hey, these are the things that we need you to go solve and try to get done over the next 18 months. So every 2 sprints, we plan for the next 3 sprints. Every quarter, we plan for the next 6 months. And then every 6 months, we plan for the next 18. Right? So it's continuously rolling alignment. All right, good. So that's kind of the slides to set it up. We'll kind of walk through the demo if you don't mind.
Yeah.
All right. So there's not a, remember we talked about, hey, we have a charter as a team. This is actually one of our teams inside of our space of the Agile space that we're working on. You can see here that we have a bunch of scenarios that we're trying to solve, right? So there's nothing magical about it, right? We just have some scenarios. A lot of times they're just one-liners. These are the things that this team needs to go fix. And then if we'll go ahead and expand that out, we'll go ahead and say, all right, they're going to go investigate. They're going to figure these things out. They're going to go ahead and prioritize just like any other team would. We'll put the features in place. And then eventually we say, yep, leadership says, like, these are the things we want to go do, great. And then we'll go ahead and start putting those into sprints. And so, go ahead and go to the next board. So now we've aligned at the team level. We went ahead and built our 3-sprint plan out. But when we talk about, like, in the larger organizations, in a larger group, our team is part of a broader group that has 4 teams in it. So we're in Agile space, we have 4 teams. And one thing we want to do is we want to make sure that all of our teams are aligned in that group, right? We want to make sure that we're working together on the same kinds of stuff, making sure that there's no dependencies across the different teams. And the way we do that is with what we call our delivery plan. So you can see the delivery plan here. Basically what it does is it's going to plan out the multiple work items or features across basically a roadmap view and how they land in each sprint. One thing to note too is because we're aligned on sprints, it makes it a lot easier to kind of see how things display on that timeline. If we had multiple sprint lengths for all the different teams, it'd be a lot harder to organize. And then we'll go ahead and we just sit down before we do these 3-sprint plans. We sit down as a group between our team leads of engineering and PM and our group leads, and we just sit down and walk through this. Like, we kind of do a scrum of scrums. We'll walk through each of the sprint or each item and say, here's what we're doing. And that breaks out this broader conversation dialogue about, hey, I have a dependency that you're working on, or you have a dependency that I'm working on, or we might have a control that we're working on that another team is going to work on. Maybe we can collaborate on that. We can move the work items across the different sprints. We can go ahead and move them across different teams, that kind of thing. So that's how we align as that broader group, and we do that about every 2 sprints. We say, here's our next 3-sprint plan, and we kind of use this to go through that. And you can see all the different teams that are on there as we go through. And then eventually the way this circles back is this plan can then be brought up to our leadership team about, hey, here's what we're doing every 3 sprints, and making sure that they're aligned with this type thing. So that's kind of the alignment piece, and then I'll let Charles take over for the autonomy piece.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. So Dan talked about a few things. He talked a lot about alignment, and the one piece that I'm going to talk about a little more is autonomy. I see a few familiar faces out in the crowd from yesterday, so a few of you have heard me speak a little bit about Agile and about how we do Agile at Microsoft. And I think what Dan mentions when he says autonomy is really important, because a lot of times you think about Agile and you think about the Agile manifesto and sort of this framework for how you should do things, but what we find is that a lot of times there isn't a one-size-fits-all. You know, we're going to talk to you about how we do Agile at Microsoft. And the really cool thing about what I'm going to walk you through, and sort of what Dan has already started walking you through, is these are actually our real VSTS accounts. This is our real data. These are our teams. This is what they're working on. So this is not just fudge data that we've made up to show you. So what I'm going to do first is I'll sort of start with your intro into VSTS and sort of where you land in the product when you come in. And this is what we call the me pages. And the way I like to think about the me pages are essentially sort of 2 questions here. So one, what's important to me, and what am I responsible for? So we have 4 different hubs here: projects, my favorites, my work items, and my pull requests. So at the project level, this is where you can get a really quick view of recent projects you've interacted with, or quickly look through all the projects that belong to that account. Underneath my favorites, this is a really great place for you to bubble up what's important to you. So whether it's a repository, whether it's queries, whether it's plans, whatever those artifacts are that are most important to you as an individual and what you want to keep track of and what's going to help you do your job, this is where you can favorite those things and quickly access them to get to where you need to go within the product. The next piece is my work items. No magic there. It's literally exactly what it sounds like. Here you can get a few different views. You can see what's assigned to you. So what am I responsible for? What am I delivering right now? What do I need to get done? Following, this is a really great way for you to keep track of pieces of work that might be of interest to you. So perhaps there's another team that's working on something that you have a dependency on. You want to follow that work item and get constant notifications. So you'll get email notifications if something has changed or something happens on that work item. You can quickly come here and see everything that you are following and unsubscribe or subscribe if you want to make sure that you're keeping track of those things. Mentioned is a little bit different. So mentioned is if someone has what we call @mentioned you in a work item, and that essentially means that they've called you out and they've asked you for something. This is where all of those show up. So if you quickly need to go through and say, hey, these are all the items that someone has asked me a question, and I need to go through and triage these and make sure that I'm responding. So I'll actually just pop open one of these. Let's just pop open this one here. So this is a work item form. So this is in the new rules UI we released. We're doing some work there to handle a UI error. And you can see here one of the engineers on my team mentioned me, sending me a screenshot of what that new UI is going to look like. So I can quickly come back in and I can respond to him and say, hey, that looks great. Let's go ahead and let's go forward with this. Or no, don't like this. Let's change something here. So that's sort of what I mean when I say mentioning. And this, like I said, this is the work item form, so I guess this is a really good, let me take a pause here and let you sort of walk through this and absorb this. But the work item form, this is a bug, and we have our repro steps here. Typically what we do is we fill out, what are those things that we're looking to reproduce if it's a bug, and what do we expect it to actually look like, and then what part of the product is it affecting, so we can go ahead and find that. This is sort of the state, so we're saying this has been resolved, what area does it belong to. So a lot of you are probably familiar with this already. But what I'll do is, the next thing I'm going to jump into is I'm going to switch over to our dashboards. And this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about that autonomy piece and how each of our teams do things differently. So our dashboards are a really great way to visualize the metrics and the data that are important to you about your team. So this is my team. If you look here, we have a card that tracks sort of the status of our current sprint. So how many days are left in the sprint, how much work do we have left to do in that sprint. So this is our current sprint right now. This is the last week of the sprint back in Seattle where everybody's working. We have about 69 work items that we're still working on. We have things that we are bubbling up, like how many active bugs do we have by engineers, so who's responsible for those bugs, who needs to go ahead and close those out, active bugs by priority, so do we have a ton of really high priority bugs this sprint, do we have low priority bugs, where does that balance fall, and where do we need to focus our attention. And the really cool thing to notice, like I said, is this is fully customizable. So this is the way that my team does it. All of these widgets, you can change them out. You can do burn down widgets. You can do whatever it is that your team wants to track. So what I'll do is I'll switch over here. Let's go to this one. So this is another one of our teams. So they do their boards completely different than we do. So they have here on the left, they have a list of resources for their team. So if a new engineer or a new team member is joining, they can quickly look through these resources and find information about what it is that they want to know. They have these nice little cards here that sort of bubble up really easy to spot metrics about active bugs, what they need to triage, LSI work, things like that. So you can see sort of how even internally, each of our teams is doing things differently at Microsoft. We're all part of the same product. We're all part of the same overall organization, but each of us is choosing that autonomy piece and how we deliver as teams differently. And so then the next piece that I'll talk to a little bit more about is stories and our backlogs and how we do planning. So I'm actually going to flip over here to our backlog, and I'll speak a little bit to sort of what Dan talked about. So if you look there on the left, right here you have scenarios, features, and stories. And what Dan pointed out was that at the scenario and feature level, that's really where our leadership, that's where they care about, that's what they want to see, where we're planning, what's the roadmap for our teams, where we're headed. But when you get down to this level where I'm at now at stories, this is really where it's up to our teams to decide how they want to prioritize that work. So they can come in here, they can add new user stories to represent those features that they're working on, those smaller incremental pieces of value to deliver to complete those features. You can come in here, you can reprioritize these things by dragging and dropping. And then you can also switch over to the board view here and get a really nice visual on our Kanban board of where those work items fall within that sprint. So if you look here, the way that we've customized it, we have 4 different swim lanes. And we have all of these work items that are pulled from that backlog and that are at different stages. So each of those column headers, sprint backlog, active work, review, bug bash, done, they sort of represent how my team personally has chosen to track our workflow over the course of a sprint. So whether a bug is currently active, whether it needs to be reviewed, or whether or not it's in bug bash, which means that we're having teams come in and actually actively go through the UI and make sure there are no issues or errors with what we're releasing. If you take a look at the swim lanes, this is another instance of how my team has done it, particularly for us. So the way that we like to split it out is by value streams. So we have DRI, which is direct responsible individual. So that means if there's anything that's a very high priority bug coming in, a live site incident, something like that happening, then that's where all that work is going and being tracked. We also have other parallel work streams like process migration or rules and UX, UI stuff. And that's how we sort of split out those buckets of work. But if you look over at another one of our teams, you can see that they've done theirs completely different. They split their team into smaller sub-teams where they have an F team and an E team. The F team is working on features. The E team is working on sort of engineering specific requirements. So, it's just an example again of how we're doing things differently, even internally between teams. You'll also notice that their workflow is a little bit different. So they have investigate, design, implementation, pull requests. So they've sort of split out that workflow differently than we do. And then sort of just pulling it back up together. If you switch over here to features, again, like this is sort of where we as PMs, we sort of live in that in between what's important to leadership and in between what's important to our teams. And then we're doing our planning here and sort of assessing, what do we need to do to make sure these features are ready for the engineering team? Where is this at? And we're tracking this here. And that all sort of relates directly back to the plans that Dan went over. So that's sort of a little bit of an insight into how we do VSTS within Microsoft. And definitely come and ask us any questions. We'll be at the expo. You can come get more detail, and we can go over some more of this stuff specifically.
We'll be hanging out over here for a little while. You guys want to talk?
Yeah. Go.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.